So, hello and welcome, Neil and Courtney. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to just introduce yourselves, please.
Look at me first. So I'm Neil. I'm the clinical lead for Acute and PICU Services. And this is Courtney.
Yeah, I'm Courtney Green. I'm the head of occupational therapy at Cygnet Woking, and my clinical caseload is on a PICU.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. As you know, we're using this season as an opportunity to talk about our new book. And Neil, I know you led the chapter for the acute and PQ services with a lot of support from various other OTs within your service line. Unfortunately, we can't fit them all in the studio here today, but you've invited Courtney along with you. She's been very involved in that, to be able to have a chat about how that's gone and what content we've got in there. Can you start maybe just by explaining to people who might be watching or listening what the role of an occupational therapist looks like in those services? I'm aware we've talked about two different service lines there that we tend to group together, but maybe if you want to take one of those each and tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, I mean, the group together because they're very similar services. I'll probably talk a little bit about acute maybe, if you want to cover PICU. So in comparison to maybe some of the other service lines, the much shorter length of admission, much faster pace. So all about sort of efficiency as and effectiveness. You're acute. You probably looking at sort of round about sort of 4 to 6 weeks length of admission. There will be sort of people that might come in, go a little bit sooner than that. You might have a few that stay a bit longer, that maybe we sort of feel the need to move on to different services and things like that. But it's very much about kind of identifying the needs of the individuals, looking at their occupational functioning, lots of kind of assessments, looking at how they're going to manage, whether they're going to be able to function independently when they get home, and what sort of support they might need. For acute, probably less restrictions than maybe some of the PICU services. I'm sure Courtney will go on to talk about. So you've got quite a range of things that you can do, but less about rehabilitation, much more about kind of supporting around functional skills, referring on to other services if required, but just snappy, short sort of intervention strategies, just looking at kind of developing skills within that short period of time.
Yeah, it's much more time limited, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And acknowledging what you can do within that
Yeah.
short frame of time. It's very much around that assessment process, isn't it? And what can realistically be done to move somebody on. Courtney, did you want to kind of add a few bits thinking specifically about acute?
So in PICU, I think, well, with acute, I think as well, is as it is short stay, we kind of identify the patients that need the most intervention. So that's identified by us as a multidisciplinary team or ourselves as occupational therapists. Patients can also self-refer. And there's a lot of requests from often the funders, the home teams, on what this patient will need to achieve or what support they'll need on discharge. Whereas in PQ, it's quite different. PQ, I think our average stay is normally about up to 12 weeks. Obviously, our patients come into the psychiatric intensive care being extremely unwell, extremely vulnerable, and we treat people assertively, holistically but assertive, to try get them as well as they can be as quickly as possible and back into a least restrictive environment such as an acute ward. Or these days we are seeing people discharged back to the community due to the lack of availability of acute beds in all over the country.
And is that changing your interventions, knowing that that's a different kind of placement at the end of there and that they're going to a different environment? Are you having to adjust the way that you work?
I think so. I think the patient that we know will be going to an acute ward. So certain trusts have different protocols, and they will insist that their patients come back to a local trust acute bed. I therefore, not too worried about making recommendations for homes. So we've got a model of cares for all our service lines. So acute and PQ, we have our own model of care that we follow. I'll make sure that I've done all the necessary assessments. A lot of the assessments on the PICU are done observation-wise, because obviously our patients aren't always able to engage. So that's where we would observe them as a multidisciplinary team, contact their friends and family, get any case history notes, and work a lot of our formulation around that and what they're going to need. It does make things a bit more difficult when we know they're going from a PICU directly back into the community, because there is such a change in restriction in the environment. And there, I think it comes in a lot of making those recommendations of what that person's going to need support-wise based on what we've seen in the PICU, but also what's going to keep them well in the community. And again, like Neil said, a lot of referring to external agencies, so that person has that right level of support. It's not ideal, obviously, to send someone back to such a contrasting environment, but it is happening, and I think we've had to then adapt to that.
And I think historically PICUs would be a lot shorter length of stay, because it would be that, manage that level of risk and acuity, move them on to like an acute, and then that the rest of the work would be done there. Whereas now, I think because there's been that shift, I think OTs have really got a big role within PICU, which historically maybe wasn't quite the case. Really important in terms of looking at how well they're going to be able to manage, how well they're going to be able to function, as well as managing the risks that come with that kind of service line, so that they're able to kind of manage themselves safely. So I think it's increased that level of need for occupational therapy, because really plays one of the biggest roles in terms of moving people on, to other services, because if they're not able to look after themselves, if they can't cook for themselves, if they can't maintain their self-cares, it's they're going to struggle when they get out, and they're going to be coming straight back into hospital. So it's a massive role within acute and PICU services. So I think that's why I love this particular service line, because you play such a strong role in kind of positively moving people forward, and getting them to where they want to be, because
ultimately that's why we're there, isn't
absolutely.
it? Yeah.
I think it's also a really rewarding service line, though, because people do come in so unwell. You're talking to someone that's really difficult to engage, or to have a conversation with. But through our observations and through our collateral information, working with the family, friends and carers, working with a multidisciplinary team, we play a very big role in implementing strategies with the patient, even without them being 100% intrinsically motivated or engaged. We're putting, say, 90% of the effort in, and they're giving us 10, but we're doing that work with them as soon as possible to allow them to have more coping strategies, and things like that to get well, so that when we're looking at community or step down to an acute, how can they take the work that we've done with them, the interventions that we've done with them on the PQ or acute wards, and use that at home to hopefully manage better in the community.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking about, we're talking about the way that's grown relatively recently and relatively quickly within Cygnet, as a service line with occupational therapy input. There has been a real increase recently, hasn't there? All the reasons that you've just said there, Neil. And I guess that's driven us to quite recently have to think about what that model looks as those services change and as we grow and streamline those services. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about how you've developed those models and put them into place?
Yeah, so I mean, there have been acutes and PICU services within Cygnet, but as you say, there wasn't as many. So I think in terms of the OT pathway, it wasn't quite as standardised. Lots of great work had been done, developed really great tools when I stepped into the service line. Working on some really great projects. So I think what was important for us was to kind of pull this together and standardise this, especially when you get in, new occupational therapists coming in, or people moving from one service line to another who've worked in a very different kind of pace of being an occupational therapist, and maybe different kind of sort of way of working with service users. It's really important to have something like almost that guidance in terms of what the role is, and just having that so that there's that kind of protection of the role, and the sort of standardisation of the processes, because you have to work so efficiently, but you want it to be effective. You don't want to just be rushing things. You want it to be good work that we're doing, the best work that we can be doing. So very much as a service line, everyone's been very much involved in that. Really keen to kind of get people, buying into that process and involved in that process. So that's been a big part, and a big part in terms of developing our chapter was doing that work in terms of developing the pathway, the standards of how we do things, taking it down to basics, and then kind of building it up from there. And it's been a really, good piece of work, a real group effort, and I think it's brought people's confidence levels up. I think where you've got, people who are just stepping into the service line, I feel like they've got a greater understanding of what our role is. Setting up the working parties for the pathway in the book has been really helpful in terms of just getting people involved. And Courtney, has been a great help with that. So Courtney and another OT, Sarah, took on kind of the deputies in terms of the working parties and ensuring that, they had that support. And it was just a great way to kind of get all the OTs involved. As much as we're a big service line, we kind of know everyone across the...
Yeah.
I
And
think
helps them grow that identity as well, I imagine, doesn't it? As I say, it is such a developing service line. The more and more people that you're pulling into that, and they see themselves working within acute or within PICU and how they can support each other, I think that in itself is really important, isn't it?
I think where we differ as well within Cygnet is the understanding that occupational therapists are really needed on PICU and acute wards. That's not something you see in all trusts or other organisations. I think that's, Neil and I do a lot of networking outside of Cygnet as well with regards to, National Association of PICU. And PICU, we are very involved with them because part of this pathway and part of our project has been to look at national minimum standards, because as Neil said, when we went back to basics, we wanted to say, right, what is the bare minimum of what we need in our service line in order to make it the best possible? And if a new service opens, what do we need? So we went back to basics. And with those working parties, what was nice was we split it up into areas such as our initial assessments that we do with our patients. We looked at our interventions that we do, our care planning, and we really went back to legislature and the NICE guidelines and what's available, and we split up into mini working parties with OTs from all across the country. We are arguably one of the biggest service lines. We're spread all across the UK. We're so far from each other, but Zoom's made it possible, working so well together, ensuring that occupational therapists, whether they are newly qualified or have been practicing for 15 years, 20 years, are all working together. And the beauty of this is that we've got to look at, right, what is the bare minimum? And then how can we work on it to ensure that it's extraordinary, that we're doing the best that we can? And that's the beauty of, I think, Cygnet within the service lines, is we've got so much power to recreate and have a say in what we're offering. And we've looked at from where we've come from, we've gone, this paperwork is far too much and it's not really working for us. What can we do about it? And we've gone back to the therapists who are actually doing it on the ground on a daily basis, saying, how's this working for you guys? Come on, give us your say. Let's do it. What's working for the patients? And that there's a lot to say about that, in us being able to kind of, look at these chapters for the book and how are we operating as a unit and as a service line. And I think it's gone even further to show how many referrals we get, how relied upon we are as part of the multidisciplinary team, and how important it is to have occupational therapists in these service lines. And I think we've got to the point now where every single one of our Acute PICU services has an occupational therapist, not always full-time perhaps, but supported by staff as well. And I think it's really valuable.
And it's how we evidence what difference that makes as well, isn't it? We can sit here and say we know that makes a difference, but actually how are we capturing that? What are our outcome measures? How are we showing to the wider world that actually occupational therapy is the thing that's making a difference to that patient group?
We've got examples where, maybe there hasn't been occupational therapy and funders aren't happy for patients to be discharged. I moved across to set up an OT service where there hadn't been one, and a lot of that was around where funders were not comfortable for patients to go home without that OT input. So, just in terms of like the referrals and then that demand for those assessments, for those recommendations, it really sort of highlights that importance.
Speak for itself, doesn't it?
I think there was a report that was run last year as well, where looking at our length of stay within Cygnet, PICU and acute in comparison, to other trusts, and ours was quite low. And they were asking themselves, well, what's the difference? And I think the only major difference they could look at is how well staffed we are from a therapeutic perspective. And I think that goes to show is that amount of therapeutic input in helping, in playing that role. Obviously, medication is very important in acute and PICU, but so is that skills building, those functional skills, and getting people, well and ready for the community. And I think, that's where we look at our value, but we also have the beauty of running quality improvement projects, don't we? Where we actually look at that data, and we're doing an exciting one on the PICU and acute wards at the moment with regards to sensory input. So was part of our bare minimum standard of what we wanted to offer for all therapists from a kind of a sensory strategy, sensory modulation perspective. And what we did is we pulled all the data of challenging behaviour, violence and aggression, including self-harm. We've implemented our project, which is 2 parts, 1 training and 1 package of intervention for clients who everyone gets, especially on the PQ, and then we pulled some data afterwards. So we're on the 2nd cycle, and it's having the freedom to do things like that as well, that's showing that that's our direct intervention that's made that difference.
What an exciting project. And I think in one of the other episodes we were talking about sensory integration, and actually how it isn't the be all and end all when you're working with someone with sensory needs, and those sensory strategies are just as important, how we can roll that out in lots of different service lines with lots of different people and needs. So it's great to see that that's happening, and that you're able to evidence the impact that that's having.
It's been so exciting. I mean, I don't have a formal sensory training background, so I think to be a part of being able to design those sessions from a, if you could say, layperson's perspective when it comes to sensory, we all have our occupational therapy degrees and we all have an idea, but from a sensory integration, I'm not trained, but I am trained in modulation. Anyone can do strategies, and it's about breaking down those barriers and filling our staff with confidence. And that's what our project's been about, really, is designing something that's accessible, that's able to be recreated on other units.
And that's going to be the big thing, isn't it? Once we've kind of finish this QI project, it will be something that we can roll out, and there's already that kind of excitement across the services in terms of OTs that are quite keen to to be doing this. So I think it's,
and across the country, might I add.
Yeah,
we've had lots of requests,
a lot of sort of external,
Yeah.
Like Courtney mentioned, through NAPIQ, real keenness, and that keenness to kind of utilise some of the things that we're able to develop.
And how great then that we can work collaboratively with people in other organisations and really strengthen what those needs are and how we can deliver that.
Well, that's what we said, is we're not precious about this. This is about things that we develop because we've got the support within Cygnet to have that time to do it. And we've got our quality improvement teams to support us. We've got the resources. We put that time aside. We have that time invested in us in order to do these things, which will benefit our patients at the end of the day. And we're not precious about it. We want to share it. We want to share it with all our colleagues. It's not something that's kind of just for us that we're going to keep in house. We want everyone to benefit for us, although we've done the groundwork and it's been a lot of fun. I think that's our next book though, Neil, isn't it? We want to we want to kind of make sure we put all our thoughts, feelings and effort into a standardized release so that anyone can use it, but we make sure we explain why we've done this project in the first place and how we've tweaked it. And, even now
Keeps it in context,
yeah,
doesn't it?
and we're tweaking it now in lines with us moving towards VDT Mocha as a model within our service line. We're now looking at our project going, how do we upgrade and downgrade these sessions in line with VDT Mocha, and pulling in therapists that are really good with that, and making sure that when we do share it, it's polished and it's ready for everyone to use. But yeah, I think that's the beauty, is we're allowed to do that.
And I think what we're fortunate for having is such a diverse skill set within our, within our service line, within Cygnet, that we can sort of pull upon that. And, people have got that experience across different service lines, that experience of, working in different countries, different models, and being able to kind of pull that and develop something really exciting that, we're obviously excited about it, but that's getting that excitement from other organisations, and that really keen for us to kind of share that with them. So I think that's just sort of credit to the to the skill set that we have, the passion that our
It's what
OTs
drives it,
have,
isn't it?
Absolutely, and the ability within the organisation to do these things, and not be stuck behind too much red tape. And I think that's what's kind of attracting and has kind of attracted people to kind of look at Cygnet as well.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with someone recently at an event, and explained, that we don't work under prescriptions. We are the therapists in our service line. We have our service line needs. Neil leads us in acute and PICU, but it's everyone come and contribute. Everyone has got a say in what we do on a daily basis, and there's a lot of power in that, making sure we're following the latest guidelines and evidence and research, and no one person has more power than the other. So no matter if you are newly qualified, you come in and you've got a fabulous idea that you've picked up from a placement somewhere, you bring it in and we work with it. We respect that idea. And those working parties were so good in getting maybe the people that weren't as confident to speak up, or thought, I'm newly qualified, I'm not going to say that. It's brought a lot of ideas out of them because they're so hungry for change. And this has given them the ability, the way that we work within Cygnet has given them the ability to really have a say in what they're doing on the ground level, and not us being prescriptive of this is what you will do.
It's people realising that they all have a unique skill set, isn't it? And every single one of them has something to bring to that. You're leading that, Neil, so from your perspective you're kind of pulling that together and guiding people, but it's encouraging out of each one of them, isn't it, that they are all involved.
And I mean, we've got people that have been working as OTs for years and bring that experience, which is really useful, but like Courtney's saying, we have those coming through from fresh from uni with this new training, new ideas, and it's just great to kind of pull all that together, for those that are a bit more senior, to support those that are more junior coming in, but to really get that new energy that's coming through from the people that are just starting out. And they have great, they come out with really good ideas, and then that can be just honed and worked on as a group, and has led to some really exciting projects and future ones that we've got sort of lined up.
I think what's nice about having a service line is you've got all those different people, but you've got that just such a strong support network. So yes, we have our pathway that we follow, and it's wonderful because I've come from an acute ward at another hospital. I've picked up and gone to an acute and PQ at a new site, and I know what's expected of me. I know when I've got a new starter that's in PQ and acute, I send Neil an email and he ensures they're welcomed and inducted and they know what's expected of them. This is what we do. Anyone could literally pick it up, walk. Someone working in high dependency rehab could come join us tomorrow and have an idea of what they're expected to do. But there's also that beauty of molding it to fit your unique service, because not one acute ward or PICU is the same at any site. And that's where the support comes in as well, that allows for, pinging an email to someone in the email group saying I need help with A, B, or C, or saying, can I come visit your service and see how you do things? And
so much to be learned from visiting each other, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And like you say, there's the unique aspect to each ward, even though there's the core framework for the service line. It's having that flexibility to change and meet the needs of the current population, the staff team, the environment, isn't it? When you think about the patient group that you're working with and the service line that you're within, what do you think the biggest challenges are?
I think, the nature of it, I think the challenge can be the how we're saying it can be quite fast paced. So you have to be able to work flexibly, you need to be able to sort of think on your toes, adapt, because, patients will come in, services will come in with their own kind of unique needs. So I think, that can be a big challenge in terms of knowing what to do. But like Courtney says, I think the fact that we've got such a good supportive group, you can always, if you've got a patient that comes in that you're a bit unsure about, you can just send an email out to the group, and there'll always be someone that will have had some kind of an experience
Similar
that can
situation,
can support with that. I think PICU's had its challenges in terms of kind of historical views of how needed is OT when you've got patients who are so unwell, what value. But I think that's where we've kind of adapted. Courtney mentioned the VDT Mocha, which is a model that we're moving across to, which is very much about working with patients at all levels of ability, and it very much looks at people that are at that lowest level of ability and what the OT role would be in terms of helping them to move up those levels and and get them to a point where they're at their optimal level of functioning. So I think we've adapted as a profession, certainly within the company, to kind of meet those challenges in terms of these kind of difficulties. And I think that we've overcome a lot of these problems just through kind of adapting and being able to adapt, and not kind of just working in the same ways that it's always.
Yeah, it's that
it's always
constant
been.
review, isn't it? And that, I guess, that dynamic approach to the service line that's enabled you to grow with it together.
Yeah.
I think sometimes a challenge that I find is, as occupational therapists, we tend to be the ones that are the driving force of least restrictive. And it's about being able to put our interventions into practice, but getting the rest of the staff on board, because there is a lot of fear when it comes to acutely unwell patients and the risk levels. But, it's really working with the staff to understand the reason why we are doing certain interventions and how important they are, and how we need to take positive risks in order to see, benefits for the people. And I think within Cygnet as a group, we have our positive and safe care leads, and the company really is quite progressive in looking at least restrictive practice. But it can be difficult, because we arguably do have the most unwell patients in our service line. And we kind of think, oh, what could go wrong? And it's shifting that mindset. Okay, but what could the benefits of this intervention be? And it's constantly a balancing act between risk and safety and the benefit of everything that we do. And as Neil said, thinking on your toes, because what's considered risky for one person is not for the next.
Yeah, it's that real individualised approach, isn't it? What do you think's most rewarding? I guess the flip side to that, and we take a different approach. What's the most rewarding part of your role?
I think seeing the difference that you make. I think Courtney sort of touched upon it earlier, but I think you see that change, and you can see that change pretty quick as well within our service line, in terms of someone that's come in who has maybe, when they've been well, functioned completely well, parent, managing to coordinate,
Lots of
cooking,
different
looking after a
roles,
house, a
yeah.
job, to not being able to function even in the basic way. And I think kind of, getting to work with these individuals, supporting them early on and as soon as you possibly can, and then seeing them at the best you know, when they're going back out into the community. I mean, that's what we're there to make.
Yeah.
You know, you want to do the job to make a difference, and being able to see that within a matter of a few weeks, and that difference, and the gratitude. You know, you see that gratitude. You get that feedback from patients that are saying, you know, it's made all the difference. You know, being able to do the things again that, you know, had become so difficult for them.
I think for me, someone springs to mind. She was our 2023 occupational therapy conference keynote speaker, and she was a patient on my ward in 2022, completing her occupational therapy degree. Had some mental health concerns, found herself on a PICU. You know, not even a year later, presenting at our conference, finished her degree.
And did an amazing job of it.
Working successfully. And that's just one success story. That's someone that all of us can identify with. We are all that therapist. You can never say that it won't be you next on an acute ward or a PICU. You don't know what will happen to you in your life that would warrant an admission like that. We've had a patient who came to us one module away from finishing her social work degree and sending us pictures of herself at her graduation. And I think it's that absolute, you know, just reward of having, in such a short space of time, having someone come in so acutely unwell, but then being able to make a difference and seeing them go home. I mean, I had a patient who, when you asked what the most important thing in hospital was for her, and it was on the PQ ward, and she said it was time with the occupational therapist. And when I said why, she said, everyone's wonderful. Everyone's been so hardworking and everyone's done their job to contribute towards my recovery. She said, but the occupational therapists were arguably the ones that took the biggest risk. And I said, you know, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, you took me off the ward, you took me into a kitchen, and you let me cook a meal for myself. And she said, I'm a businesswoman, I'm a parent, and I've got to the stage where I couldn't even dress myself, or, you know, someone had to make sure I was eating 3 times a day. And she said, although I was maybe really violent and had those challenging behaviors when I was unwell, you worked with me and put that level of trust in taking me off the ward. And yes, it was something simple like making brownies, but she said it was that level of trust and taking me off the ward and spending time with me in creating something that was an end product that I could share with my family when they came in and saying, oh, look, mum's made her brownies again. And she said it was something that might seem so simple to someone else, but she said she had so much kind of respect for the therapist taking her down, and so much appreciation that someone allowed her to do something that was so important to her. And I think that has got to be the most rewarding part of working on a PQ or an acute ward.
I think that's great to see. You know, we spend a lot of time when we're doing our training where we think about building a rapport with people and getting to know what someone's needs are and what their goals are. And I think when people first think about working in acute or PQ services, probably a natural worry is that you won't have time to build those relationships or to get to know where somebody's really going and who they are as a person. And I think that's great for people to hear that actually you are still doing that. You're still building that relationship and still understanding what the core of someone is, even though it might only be a very short admission.
I think we're doing it. We're just doing it 10 times faster than everyone else. We're kind of barging our way in there. And even if it's a good morning every morning, or it's a, you know, finding out, I think occupational therapists seem to do things like find out that they have children or who's important to them and get those photos printed. You know, it's something simple like that that helps us build that rapport so quickly in, you know, just finding out what the roles are that are important to them, what they play, and how we support those roles on the ward. For example, they're a parent, or you know, they're a pet owner. How do we keep facilitating that in a restrictive environment when they're far from home? How can we, you know, get our tablets that have got Skype or Zoom on them and help them engage in those meaningful occupations despite the journey that they're in?
And I think that's the beauty of the profession, isn't it? Is that we're working with these individuals and finding out who they are, which, you know, when someone's coming into hospital, they're losing a lot of their independence. They're losing a lot of that choice, and we're providing as much as we possibly can within that kind of setting. I think that's a big thing for the patients, and one of the things, I've had patients that have said, you take them to do some cooking and it's like, thank you for a bit of normality. It's maybe been 2 or 3 weeks since I last was able to cook anything for myself and cook what I wanted to do, and I think that that's where I think we're able, and we're fortunate as a within our profession, to build those relationships. We see them as a person, not just their diagnosis. So they're not just a schizophrenic, they're not a personality disorder. They are a person that likes to cook, that likes to watch the football, whatever it might be. And I think that helps to build that rapport so much quicker. And I think we do get that kind of valuable kind of information, and find out things that maybe the other professions struggle to get that information. And I think that really helps, and it is really nice to be able to work and find out these things, and work with them, and get them back to doing these things,
the things that are important to them.
Yeah, I think that takes us back to just the initial part of our pathway that we've developed, and part of this in our book, where we're looking at how we assess. The first thing we do is sit down and ask them, what are you interested in? What do you like doing? Something simple as, what are 2 songs or 2 artists that you enjoy? A PICU is an and acute wards, incredibly busy, noisy environment. Now you've already got someone who's distressed, and then you go pop them on there with a whole lot of other patients that are distressed. And we kind of step in and think about things like putting music that they enjoy on headphones. And it's something simple like that, helping them cope from the beginning, but that's personalised to them. That makes them think, that occupational therapist actually took the time and asked me what I want and asked me what I like, and they've helped me. And I think we're very much seen as those allies and the doers on the ward as well, because we are such practical, practitioners in the team. We love doing things practically, and we have fun while doing it, our patients and us,
So important.
in our job.
So thinking about pulling all of that together, we've talked about some positives and some challenges, and what advice would you give someone, say, a student, for instance, or a newly qualified OT that was thinking about going to work in these services?
Do it. I've worked in many service lines, and that, and I love it. And I started out on a PICU when I first qualified. And you might be quite anxious. I can remember being nervous on my first day, but instantly falling in love with the service line, and the patients, the characters that you meet, and just that sense of satisfaction of seeing someone potentially at their lowest point, through to a point where they are, back to their kind of optimal level of function, or there or thereabouts, and getting them back to where they want to be. So, I think it is so rewarding, and I think anyone that's wanting to work within healthcare, it's a vocation. It's wanting something more than just pay at the end of the month. It's having that job where you feel that satisfaction that you're making a difference. So I think that's something I would say is, it's a wonderful job to do. It's a wonderful service line to work in. Not one day is the same.
Yeah.
You'll not get bored.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think from my perspective, working in our service line, you will be challenged. You'll be challenged personally. You'll be challenged professionally. But you will grow so much as a person and as a professional. As we said, you'll never be bored, not a single day. But for me, and I've worked across a lot of service lines, this is by far the most rewarding, and just being able to see the difference that we can make in such a short period of time, the gratification from that is more than you can ask for. Yeah. So I think that's what I would say. I'd say try not look at or hear the horror stories that come out. Give it a go. Go and visit an acute unit. Go visit a PICU. You'll be pleasantly surprised. Don't let the label put you off.
Yeah.
Don't let the label scare you. You know, and just know that no matter what service line you work in, it's the team that makes a difference. But I wouldn't move service lines if you paid me now, Neil.
No, not a chance. And I think, having had students, we take students, I've had a few students whose first day, that nerves, not knowing what to expect. By the end of it, I've had people who've become my OT in the past from the fact that they've just loved it so much. So I think, yeah.
It's just giving it that chance, isn't it, to find out a little bit more about how it is and if it does suit you, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a visitor recently from a community provider who's looking to support one of our ladies in the PICU, and I took them for kind of a tour, and it was just one of those days where everyone was engaged. There was karaoke going on in one room with the activities coordinator. There were some other ladies sitting down with their observation staff doing some activities, and there was just lively and it was buzzing. And they said, "Oh, this isn't what we thought a PICU would be like." And I thought, well, what have you seen? Well, they said, well, we just thought it would be really bad because we've read risk assessments and things. And I said, but you have never stepped on. How would you know? And I think that it goes to it is try not have expectations. Obviously, we have to be smart and we have to think about risk, but we're trained in that. But give it a go. Walk into it with a kind of eyes wide open and willing to take on all the opportunities.
And I think there's a lot of preconceived ideas of what mental health is in general. And your acute and PICUs are quite, traditional styles of wards. And I think, seeing things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and things like that, or, the media portraying mental health with these dangerous individuals, and they're just people like you and me, who are just needing that extra support. And I think being part of being able to help them is a wonderful thing, really. And I think, as Courtney says, see these places come, if you can see what they are like, you get a very different sort of taste of what it is like to work.
I think the beauty about the acute and PICU service line is you can have someone who has been in services and had hospital admissions, 5 hospital admissions in the last 10 years, and you can have someone who's had the first onsets of mental illness, and you can have someone who's been through a traumatic event and has required hospitalization. You can never say that it won't be you, it won't be your family member, it won't be your mum or your sister or your brother requiring these services, because, as Neil said, there's a stigma, but our patients are everyday people. And they go back to being everyday people. And I think that's the beauty, because you can have someone who, works in a librarian that's admitted, and you can have a rocket scientist that's admitted, or a famous musician. It doesn't pick one person. Mental health doesn't pick one group of people. And, we give them the same care, although they're individuals. We give everyone the same level of care, the same level of respect.
And it's remembering how privileged we are to be able to be part of that recovery journey, isn't it? To really make that difference to people. Before we bring it to a close, is there anything else that you want to add? A bit of a key takeaway from today, or anything else that you'd like to share?
I think for me, it's just the opportunities that working in acute PICU has provided. To me as an individual, but also a therapist working for Cygnet within the service line. I've got to challenge myself in so many ways. Having that say in what we do on the ground level, working alongside Neil as like a deputy project lead to ensure that everyone's got a voice. But it's allowed me to do so many things outside that I necessarily wouldn't have thought of myself doing, like opportunities like presenting at a PICU and getting our work done. And we've been invited to the annual conference at the end of this year to talk about the work that we're doing, which just goes to show that the work that we're doing in our service line is being recognized at a national level. And we don't do the work for all the accreditations and the clapping hands. We do it for our patients. but it's opened that learning curve for me as a therapist to go and present, and something I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with
But
normally.
it's that recognition that we're doing the best things for our patients, isn't it? It's that kind of external validation that the way that we're doing things in these services is the right way and is the way that other people want to do things.
Absolutely, and I think that says a lot for the therapists that we have working in our service line and the dedication, but also the support we have as Cygnet therapists to carve our own way and make sure that we are doing evidence-based practice and following all the guidelines, but also have that space to be innovative and to go out there and shout about the awesome work that we're doing. So I think that's what not only keeps me in the acute PICU service line, but keeps me working as a Cygnet occupational therapist as well.
And I think, like you're saying, it's those opportunities, isn't it? Not just to be a clinician, but to be able to be involved in a QI project, to be presenting at NAPIQ and conferences and things like that. And that might sound really scary. And, we don't want to scare people off, in terms of that. But I think if you maybe thought when you were first training, or when you first qualified, some of these things that I've done, I would not have ever thought I would have had the confidence to do or been able to do. But I think the fact that, you grow, and you can grow within the company, you can grow within the service line to be able to build those, to build your confidence and to build your knowledge and to build your expertise and those experiences. And it is very much about that kind of that growth as an
Which
occupational
in turn,
therapist.
as you grow, your confidence to shape the service line grows, doesn't it? And that continues to build upon itself, really. You're growing, the service line is growing, and the whole thing continues to build. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. It's been really interesting. I'm sure that people that are listening or watching have taken a lot out of that conversation. And, if anyone does have any further questions, they can always get in touch with us and pick your brains a little bit, can't they?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.